The heavy oak doors of Courtroom for C groaned open as the clock struck 9 a.m. A rush of murmurs drifted through the packed gallery as Monday's proceedings began. An ordinary day for the courthouse regulars, a terrifying one for Ava Richardson. She stepped in, her back straight, her movements deliberate. The second-hand navy suit she wore had been pressed the night before. It seemed slightly worn but dignified. In her left hand, she clutched a weathered brown briefcase too large for her frame. Its leather cracked along the edges, the brass clasp clicking faintly with each step. Her grandfather's briefcase. She'd spent nights sleeping beside it, and years learning from the papers it once carried. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting a pale sheen over the beige walls and still benches. At the center of the room, elevated on his perch like an old king watching peasants stumble over protocol, sat Judge Whitaker, 62, white, trimmed beard the color of ash. His robe draped over him like armor, and his gavel rested not gently, but like a weapon he couldn't wait to wield. His courtroom was a performance and he always wanted the best lines. When Ava stepped forward, there was an immediate shift. The clerk narrowed her eyes, instinctively reaching for the docket. "Mum, are you delivering something for the defense?" the clerk asked, puzzled. Ava's voice was soft, but controlled. "I'm here to represent the defense." That got a few heads to turn. Judge Whitaker looked up from the file in front of him, already annoyed. He leaned forward slowly, as if confirming that yes, a teenager really had spoken those words. "I'm sorry, are we in the middle of dress-up day at Roosevelt High?" he said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Where's your attorney, sweetheart?" The courtroom chuckled quiet, but enough to sting. Ava's cheeks flushed hot, but her eyes didn't drop. She took a step closer to the bench. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I filed the motion myself," she said, "under Article 4C. I'm here representing my brother as his legal guardian, and I have standing under emergency relief provisions." The air shifted. The laughter stopped. Whitaker's smile evaporated into a scowl. He glanced at the docket again, then at the clerk. "Motion 1-B, is this some kind of prank?" He muttered. "No prank," Ava said, gently setting her briefcase. On the table in front of her, "My brother's public defender didn't show. Again. He's been held for over a week on charges based on faulty ID. He was never given a proper bail hearing. So I read the rules. I filed the motion. I have the documentation." Whitaker leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "And you thought the right thing to do was play junior litigator in my courtroom?" "I thought the right thing to do," she replied, her voice tightening, "was make sure my brother didn't get railroaded because no one else bothered to care." A silence fell. For a beat, even Whitaker didn't respond. He gave a dismissive wave to the bailiff. "Verify her paperwork. I want to know who let this circus roll into my court." The bailiff stepped forward, took Ava's stack of neatly stapled filings. As he walked them to the bench, Ava stood motionless. Her hands were clenched in front of her, but her jaw was firm. Whitaker flipped through the forms with lazy disinterest. But then something shifted. His brows drew together. The forms were in order, statutes cited, emergency guardian order included, legal citations correct, signatures authentic, every I dotted, every T crossed. He sighed, exasperated. "Well," he muttered, "we are clearly off the rails already, but fine. You've got 5 minutes. Miss Richardson, indulge this fantasy of yours. Make it good, because if you waste this court's time, I won't," Ava said. She opened her grandfather's briefcase. The brass hinges creaked like a door to another era. Inside, neatly ordered manila folders. Her trembling hands reached for the first one. Whitaker tapped his gavel once. "Begin." Her voice shook on the first word, but only the first. The courtroom was still for a breath along, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm. Ava inhaled slowly and looked down at her notes, each one handwritten in ink that had smudged in places from her nervous fingers the night before. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in front of a judge known for humiliating attorneys twice her age. Not standing in a courtroom where she'd once sat in the back row watching her grandfather argue civil rights cases decades earlier. But Jamal was in custody, 14 years old, wrongfully accused, terrified, and forgotten. So Ava stood. "The defense would like to enter Exhibit A," she said, lifting a page from the folder and sliding it toward the clerk's table. A sworn affidavit from Officer Ramirez stating that my brother, Jamal Richardson, was not positively identified at the scene and was placed under arrest solely based on his hoodie. Color. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. Color, he said with a smirk. You're basing your defense on a hoodie color, Miss Richardson. No, Your Honor, Ava said without blinking. The prosecution is. A quiet murmur swept through the gallery again. Ava didn't look at them. Her eyes were on the judge, who now sat upright and unamused. Not smiling, just watching. She turned to the projector and clicked the remote. A still image appeared on the courtroom screen, a grainy surveillance photo of a figure sprinting through a parking lot. Low light, hazy, the figure wore a black hoodie. Here is the footage the police used to make their arrest, Ava said, her voice growing clearer with each word. The problem is this was taken at 9:12 p.m. on March 3rd. At that exact time, Jamal was on a city bus 3 blocks away. Whitaker leaned back. Do you have evidence of that? Or just another PowerPoint presentation? Ava opened another folder. Bus camera footage, GPS stamped, obtained through a public records request. Filed 3 days ago. My brother boards at 9:04 p.m. gets off at 9:17 p.m. There are 12 seconds of footage where he's visible from 2 angles, one of which clearly shows his face. She tapped the screen. If the court would allow, I'd like to play that. Now, Judge Whitaker motioned reluctantly. Play it. The courtroom lights dimmed as the footage rolled. There, clear as day, was Jamal, slouched in his seat, earbuds in, head bobbing. A teenage boy doing nothing but riding home. Another angle showed the timestamp. The courtroom was silent again, but this time, the silence was heavier. Tense. Ava turned back to face Whitaker. My brother was arrested an hour later while walking home. He was searched, cuffed, and booked. No weapon, no stolen property, just the hoodie. Ms. Langston, the assistant district attorney, shuffled in her seat. Her previously cocky posture began to collapse inward. She whispered something to her paralegal, who quickly typed something into her tablet. Objection, Langston said suddenly. This footage hasn't been authenticated through official evidentiary channels. It could have been altered. It's from a government-issued request, Ava countered, and the prosecution has had over a week to provide evidence, yet failed to disclose any discovery that directly ties my brother to the scene. She stepped forward now, the projector light casting a halo behind her. Your Honor, what we have is a black teenager arrested for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or, more accurately, arrested for matching a hoodie color and walking while black. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the gallery. Judge Whitaker stared at her for a long moment, then turned to Langston. Counsel, do you have any actual eyewitnesses or forensic evidence placing this boy at the scene? Langston faltered. Your Honor, the case is still under investigation, so we're detaining a child on speculation. Whitaker's voice cut like a whip. On a color match, Langston's mouth opened, then shut. She turned her eyes downward. Ava took that moment to drive her point home. Jamal's record is clean. His school attendance is consistent. He's in advanced placement math. The officer who arrested him claimed he looked like the suspect. That's it. That's what passed for probable cause. Whitaker didn't respond. He stared at Ava again, this time without sarcasm, just a long, cold, calculating look. A flicker of something else moved across his face. Doubt, maybe even guilt. I'll take this under advisement, he said finally. 5-minute recess. As the gavel fell, the room exhaled. Ava didn't sit. She stepped outside the courtroom doors, her hand gripping the metal railing in the corridor. Her legs shook beneath her, the adrenaline draining now that the fight had paused. Behind her, footsteps. She turned to find Ms. Langston approaching, tablet still in hand. You came prepared, she said, studying Ava. Her voice was level, but clipped. Who coached you? No one, Ava said. Just my grandfather's law books and some old case transcripts. And Jamal. He's the reason I studied, the reason I didn't give up. Langston stared at her a moment longer, then looked past her toward the courtroom doors. I'd watch your back, she said. That judge may be pretending to warm up, but he doesn't like being shown up. Especially not by someone like you. Someone like me. Langston's eyes hardened. Someone smart enough to know how the game is played but still foolish enough to think playing fair will win. Then she turned and walked away. Ava stayed there a moment longer, her fists clenched at her sides, her breath slow and deep. She wasn't here to play the game. She was here to break the board. And the real trial hadn't even begun yet. The courtroom reconvened 10 minutes later, but the atmosphere had changed. The gallery was no longer just a blur of bored observers and casual attendees. It had taken on the energy of a crowd watching a spark catch fire. Some were whispering about the bus footage, others just stared at Ava, eyebrows raised, as if trying to figure out where she'd come from, and how she just managed to corner both the prosecutor and the judge with nothing but public records and handwritten notes. Ava walked back to the defense table with her grandfather's briefcase in hand. Her palms were still damp, but her grip had changed, tighter, anchored. Judge Whitaker re-entered moments later, robe billowing, gavel already in his hand. He didn't look at Ava right away, didn't look at the Ada either. He seemed unsettled, but hiding it poorly. The court has reviewed the footage, he began. It's compelling, but until it's formally submitted into evidence, it remains supplementary. So unless either party wishes to challenge its admission, we'll proceed to the next phase. Ava stood. I'd like to call Officer Darnell. Blake to the stand. There was a pause, a tension. Langston looked up from her tablet, surprised. The defense wants to cross the arresting officer. Yes, Your Honor. Ava said, I've reviewed the arrest report and body cam transcripts. I'd have questions only he can answer. Whitaker waved his hand. Fine. Bring in the officer. The bailiff exited. A moment later, Officer Blake entered the courtroom, mid-40s, square jaw, crew cut, department commendation pins gleaming. On his uniform, the kind of man who never got questioned. Not really, and definitely not by a teenage girl in a borrowed suit. He took the stand, arms folded. Ava approached slowly, her notebook in hand. Officer Blake, she began, can you confirm the time you first observed my brother on March 3rd? Roughly 9:40 p.m., Blake replied. And your report says he was walking westbound on Tremont Avenue? That's correct. You say you identified him based on a description from the dispatch. Is that right? Yes. Would you mind reading the dispatch call log, line 17? Blake hesitated. Langston shifted in her seat. It says, black male, dark hoodie, estimated height 5', seen fleeing the scene. Ava nodded. And my brother is 5 feet 4. Blake glanced toward the judge. He looked taller in the dark. In the dark, Ava echoed. While you were in a patrol car, Blake's jaw clenched. I got out. I confirmed visually. You confirmed visually. But in your body cam transcript, you state, and I quote, I think that's our guy. Same hoodie. Not same height. Not same shoes. Not same face. Just hoodie. I acted on reasonable suspicion. Suspicion based on clothing. Ava pressed. Not behavior. Not possession of stolen items. Just fabric. Whitaker cut in. Miss Richardson, I hope this line of questioning is going somewhere useful. It is, Your Honor. One more question for the officer. She turned to the bailiff. May I approach the evidence table? The bailiff nodded. Ava walked slowly, purposefully. She reached into a labeled evidence bag and pulled out a black hoodie. She held it up. This is the hoodie Jamal was wearing when he was arrested. Correct. Yes, Blake said flatly. Then explain this. She turned the hoodie inside out. On the inside pocket, barely visible, was a stitched signature. Pierced in faded gold thread. Ava held it toward the judge. Your Honor, this hoodie was originally owned by my grandfather, passed down. He had it customized. The signature isn't common. And we discovered yesterday that the suspect in the surveillance video wasn't wearing this version. A tiny bleach stain on the back here clearly missing from the video still. She clicked. The projector zoomed in on the grainy figure. No stain, which means the person in the video wasn't wearing this hoodie, wasn't wearing his hoodie, which means Whitaker cut her off, eyes narrowed, which means circumstantial at best. Miss Richardson, but paired with the bus footage, the timestamp, the height mismatch, the ID based only on clothing. Ava turned back to Blake. Officer Blake, she said quietly, did someone instruct you to make that arrest, whether or not the suspect matched exactly? He froze. No. Did someone from the district attorney's office tell you that they were under pressure to clear this case before it hit the press? No. You hesitated. Langston stood, objection accusatory tone. Whitaker nodded, sustained. Miss Richardson, if you continue to act like this is a conspiracy thriller. Ava's voice cut him off. Calm, cold. Your Honor, my brother has been in a cell for 9 days. No physical evidence. No credible ID. And now, discrepancies in every official version of the story. If this were anyone else, if his skin were lighter, would we even be here? The words slammed into the room like a hammer. No one moved. Langston shifted in her seat. Blake looked like he wanted to melt into the witness box. Whitaker's face turned to stone. "You're walking a very fine line, Miss Richardson." "No, Your Honor," Ava replied, lifting her chin. "This entire courtroom is built on a line. I'm just the first one who refused to pretend it isn't there." The silence returned. But this one was electric dot, and then something unexpected happened. The courtroom door creaked open. A tall man in a gray suit stepped inside. Unfamiliar. He wore a courthouse visitor badge and a phone holstered at his hip. He didn't speak, just watched. Quietly, Ava's gaze flicked toward him for half a second, then back to the judge. But she knew. She was being watched now, and not just by the gallery. Cliffhanger. Outside the courthouse that afternoon, Ava's phone buzzed. No caller. ID, one message. "Stop asking questions about March 3rd. You're not ready for what you'll find." She looked up toward the rooftops across from the courthouse, where a camera lens glinted briefly in the sun. The truth had teeth, and it had just started biting back. "Would you like to continue to part for next, where the conspiracy deepens and Ava receives an unexpected ally?" The courthouse emptied slowly that afternoon, but Ava lingered on the bench outside courtroom for C. Her hands were tied around her grandfather's briefcase like it was the only solid thing, keeping her anchored. The marble beneath her feet still hummed faintly with the aftershock of what had unfolded inside her questioning of Officer Blake, her direct challenge to Judge Whitaker, and the unmistakable shift in tone from the entire gallery. But that wasn't what had her rattled. It was the man in the gray suit. She'd never seen him before. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't even taken a seat, just stood at the back like a statue, arms folded, phone never touched, watching, measuring, recording with his eyes. And now, less than an hour later, Ava sat outside with the message still glowing. On her phone screen, "Stop asking questions about March 3rd. You're not ready for what you'll find." No sender, no number, no trace. A breeze rustled the pages of her notebook as she felt the first sting of fear, not courtroom nerves or cross-examination anxiety, real fear, the kind that creeps in under your skin and settles in your bones. This wasn't just about Jamal anymore. Something else was buried under the surface of that arrest. Something someone didn't want found, and Ava had just started digging. "Ms. Richardson?" The voice was deep, smooth, and calm. She looked up. The man from the courtroom stood a few feet away now, but this time he didn't feel like a statue. He felt like a warning. "Who are you?" she asked flatly, standing with her briefcase held like a shield. He showed no badge, no ID, just offered his hand. "My name is Elijah Grant," he said. "I used to work for the city's internal affairs unit. I'm not exactly supposed to be here." "I figured," she replied. "Was it you who sent the message?" "No," he said, dead serious. "But I've been watching this case. Because March 3rd wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern." Ava narrowed her eyes. "What kind of pattern?" "The kind where certain arrests get quietly pushed through the system when the department needs to." "Show results," Elijah said, lowering his voice. "You wouldn't believe how many juvenile arrests in this city never see the inside of a real courtroom. They plead out. They disappear. But not your brother. You made noise. Now you're on their radar. And who's they?" He didn't answer, just looked up toward the courthouse roof. "Let's talk somewhere else." Ava hesitated, then followed. They walked the blocks to a cafe near the bus station, quiet and mostly empty. Elijah ordered a coffee. Ava didn't. Her stomach was twisted tightly. "I tried to bring this up 2 years ago," he said, sliding a file across the table, "about the department falsifying witness statements to tie juveniles to unsolved cases. No one listened. They told me to retire early, so I did." Ava opened the folder. Inside were mug shots, names, arrest dates. The similarities were chilling. All teenagers, all black or Latino, all arrested on vague descriptions. None convicted. All released after weeks or months. Some had dropped out of school. One had disappeared entirely. "Why would they do this?" she asked. "Funding, quotas, fear, take your pick. There's a unit inside the department, unofficial, of course, that prioritizes visible arrests after public incidents. Your brother's arrest came right after the city council hearing on youth crime stats. Someone needed a number. Jamal was convenient." Ava closed the folder. Her hands shook. "I can get you more," Elijah said, "but it won't be enough unless you make it public. I've seen your courtroom work. You're smart. You're fearless. But they will come for you if you keep pushing. I'm not afraid of them, she said quietly. You should be. They parted ways near the old train tracks. Ava headed home with the file tucked under her arm and a storm growing in her chest. When she entered the apartment, her mother was waiting at the kitchen table. Baby, she said softly, someone came by. Said they were from the courthouse, asked questions about you, about Grandpa's briefcase. Ava froze. Did you tell them anything? Her mother shook her head. Of course not. But it wasn't right. They looked through the window. One of them took a picture of your school ID from the fridge. Ava's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Next time, we won't knock. That night, she locked the doors, bolted the windows, and placed her grandfather's briefcase under her bed. Then she opened the file Elijah gave her and started comparing arrest reports. Same language, same inconsistencies, same officers, and one name showed up again. Officer Darnell Blake, the same man who arrested Jamal. The same man who had lied under oath subtly, but deliberately. But it wasn't until she looked deeper that she found something truly disturbing. A notation in a sealed juvenile report, accidentally included in Elijah's file, a date, a time, and a video file reference number footage from the night of Jamal's arrest. But not from the warehouse from inside the precinct. Ava knew she shouldn't have access. But she also knew that if she didn't find it, no one would. She pulled out her laptop and began searching the public records archived by the video number. At 2:31 a.m., after hours of decoding file names and cross-referencing timestamps, she found it. She hit play, and what she saw made her blood run cold. It wasn't Jamal on the footage. It was Officer Blake, talking to someone off camera before Jamal was brought in. We'll say it was him. Doesn't matter. His sister. She's a kid. She'll fold. The camera shook slightly as Blake laughed. Nobody cares about a black kid in a hoodie. Let it burn. Ava paused the video, her hands trembling, her vision tunneling. Then she grabbed her notebook and started writing. The trial wasn't the end. It was only the match, and now she had gasoline. Cliffhanger. The next morning, Ava walks into courtroom for carrying not just her grandfather's briefcase but a flash drive. Judge Whitaker eyes her coldly. Miss Richardson, I hope you've brought something useful. She lifts her chin. Not something, she says. Someone. And behind her, stepping into the courtroom in full uniform, Elijah Grant. Would you like me to continue with part 5? Where Ava goes head-to-head with Whitaker and publicly reveals the conspiracy on the record. The courtroom was full before 9 a.m. word had spread. Whispers from clerks, murmurs between interns, quiet text sent from one public defender's office to another. Something was going down in Foresee. Something worth watching. By the time Ava walked in, flanked by Elijah Grant, every seat was taken. Judge Whitaker sat on the bench with the same iron-jawed posture, but the usual air of smug superiority was gone. His gavel rested quietly at his side, untouched. His eyes, once so quick to roll at Ava's every motion, were now fixed on her with something else entirely. Worried. Ava wore the same navy blue suit, but it looked different now, like armor. She moved with purpose, her grandfather's briefcase in one hand and a flash drive in the other. Elijah walked a half step behind her, crisp in his formal investigator's jacket, no longer hiding, no longer retired. She approached the table. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. Miss Richardson, I hope you're not planning another stunt. No, Your Honor, Ava said. Today, I'm submitting evidence. She held up the flash drive. On this is surveillance footage from the precinct on the night of my brother's arrest. It was obtained through a lawful internal affairs archive, shared with me by a former investigator. The footage shows Officer Blake admitting on tape that he knowingly arrested the wrong person, that he assumed I'd fold under pressure, that he said, and I quote, "Nobody cares about a black kid in a hoodie. Let it burn." A hush fell like a dropped curtain. Whitaker blinked. Langston stood, stumbling over her words. Objection. This is unverified. Chain of custody. Elijah stepped forward. I'm Elijah Grant, former investigator for internal affairs. Badge number 2171. I confirm that the footage was recorded by a security camera on March 3rd at 10:40 p.m. inside Holding Cell Corridor to be. I was present when it was logged, and I personally pulled it from backup after requests for the primary file were mysteriously delayed 3 times. He turned to Whitaker. If the court refuses to admit this video, I'll take it to the state attorney general's office by noon. Langston opened her mouth, then closed it. Judge Whitaker stared at them both, and Ava stepped closer. "This isn't just about Jamal anymore," she said. "It's about how this court treats truth, how it treats kids like my brother, how it treats people who don't speak with degrees behind their names, but still come armed with facts. You told me, Your Honor, not to waste your time." She pulled the NAACP pin from her pocket, held it up. "My grandfather wore this the last time he argued a case in this very building." The judge then called him boy. "You just called me a child playing dress up. But today I came not as someone playing lawyer. I came as someone the law tried to forget. And I brought receipts." Whitaker sat back, visibly stunned. For once, he didn't interrupt, didn't smirk. He looked older, smaller, like the weight of decades was finally pressing on his spine. Ava placed the flash drive in front of the clerk. "I'm formally requesting this court admit this footage, and that Officer Blake be recalled for cross-examination. And if the prosecution refuses to acknowledge the footage, I'm also prepared to submit a formal motion for judicial bias and obstruction under Article 12. Gasps. Even Langston flinched. Whitaker exhaled slowly, as if the walls around him were beginning to close in. "This is highly irregular," he muttered. "So was jailing a child without evidence," Ava replied. Langston sat down, hard. From the back of the courtroom, someone stood. It was Mrs. Henley, the aging court clerk who had once worked beside Ava's grandfather. She said nothing. She simply clapped out once, then twice, and then others followed. Defense attorneys, interns, reporters. The gallery became a wave of quiet, powerful applause, not for spectacle, but for reckoning. Whitaker banged his gavel once. "This is still a courtroom, not a theater," he said, though the force had left his voice. But the applause had already said what the law books couldn't. Ava turned toward the bench one final time. "I'd like to call one last witness, Your Honor." Whitaker arched an eyebrow. "Who?" She paused, let the silence stretch, then said, "You." You could hear the floor creak as the courtroom shifted. Whitaker froze. "Excuse me? You've ruled over every one of these juvenile cases," Ava continued. "Cases like Jamal's, like the ones Investigator Grant uncovered. You sign off on over 130 arrests in the past 2 years based on visual ID alone. I'd like to ask under oath if you ever reviewed the evidence, if you ever saw the pattern." Whitaker's face turned a shade darker. Langston stood, now flustered and angry. "Absolutely not. Your Honor is not on trial here, but maybe he should be," Elijah said, standing beside Ava. The courtroom surged again with energy, not chaos. Something sharper, inevitable. Whitaker swallowed hard, looked down, then back up. "No," he said at last. "I won't take the stand, but I'll do something else." Ava tensed. "I'm recusing myself from this case," Whitaker said, his voice low, broken at the edges, effective immediately. "This courtroom will be assigned to Judge Rosalind Myers by the end of the day." Langston spun toward him. "Judge Whitaker, with respect, you knew," he said, eyes hard. "You knew, and you let it go forward." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Whitaker stood, removed his robe, folded it, then looked at Ava one last time. "You weren't playing dress up," he said quietly. "You were giving this court something it hasn't seen in a long time. Truth, accountability." He turned and walked out. They thought the storm would die when the judge walked out. They were wrong. It had only begun. Within 24 hours, the footage Ava submitted had gone viral, leaked by someone in the clerk's office, or maybe intentionally released. It didn't matter. It spread like wildfire. Blake's smirking admission, the racial slur, the laughter, the casual cruelty. By Tuesday morning, Ava couldn't walk 10 feet outside her building without hearing whispers. "That's her. The girl who took down the judge. 17. 17. She shredded them like a professional. The briefcase girl." And then the headlines came. "Teen legal prodigy exposes judicial corruption." Hoodie. Not evidence. The story of Jamal Richardson, the girl with the briefcase. But Ava wasn't interested in fame. Not now. Because the game had changed, and the system was fighting back. By Wednesday, Officer Blake was placed on unpaid leave, but no charges had been filed. Langston had quietly taken a leave of absence. And yet, nothing official had been said about the others. The DA who covered it, the captain who buried the footage, the judges who co-signed bogus detentions. They were betting on the fire dying down. But Ava had already decided she would drag the entire machine into the light, and she'd start in the same courtroom where they tried to humiliate her Friday, 10 a.m., courtroom for C. The media was banned, but they came anyway, packed outside the courthouse. Protesters, community leaders, young students holding hand-drawn signs that read, "I am Jamal. Let Ava speak. No more ghost arrests." Inside, a new judge sat on the bench, Judge Rosalind Myers, a stern black woman with eyes like obsidian and a record of silencing no one. She watched with quiet curiosity as Ava stood once again, briefcase by her side, Elijah in the gallery, Jamal sitting silently behind her, his hoodie replaced with a clean white shirt and navy blue tie. "This is a pre-sentencing hearing," Myers reminded the court. "Your brother has been cleared of all charges. The only matter before us is whether we dismiss the record permanently." Ava nodded. "I understand, Your Honor," she said, "but I asked the court's permission to submit one final statement. Not for Jamal, for every kid who didn't have a sister with a voice." Myers leaned back. "Proceed." Ava walked to the center of the courtroom, her voice calm, steady, but beneath it, fire. "There is a system in place that does not see children. It sees numbers, skin color, hoodie colors, zip codes, and if you match the algorithm, you disappear. You're not a boy anymore. You're a target. You're a file. You're processed. And too many courts, this one included, call it justice." She lifted the briefcase, unlatched it. "This belonged to my grandfather, civil rights attorney. Fought through fire hoses and dogs, argued in rooms where judges wouldn't look him in the eye. He said something once that I didn't understand until this week. Some people don't want the law applied. They want it obeyed." She pulled out several manila folders one by one. "These are arrest reports. Juveniles flagged by the same officers, sign off by the same judges, no physical evidence, no confessions, just proximity, pattern, profile." The courtroom sat frozen. "I'm submitting these files to this court and to the Federal Oversight Committee because clearing my brother's name is not enough. I want the system that allowed this to happen held accountable." Myers raised an eyebrow. "Miss Richardson, are you formally requesting a special inquiry?" "No, Your Honor," Ava said. "I'm demanding it." Myers studied her for a moment, then looked to the court clerk. "Let the record reflect that the motion has been received. The court will review it in full, and in the meantime," she looked to Jamal, "the charges against Jamal Richardson are permanently expunged. This court apologizes for its failure to protect his rights." The gavel came down, but Ava wasn't finished. As the courtroom began to shift, as people started to rise, she turned to face the gallery, knowing the cameras outside were listening. Through open doors, knowing this was the moment that would echo further than any ruling. "You tried to laugh me out of this courtroom," she said, "but the law is not your inheritance. It belongs to the people, and we're done being silent." Behind her, Jamal stood. Then Elijah, then the clerk, then the entire gallery. Judge Myers tapped her gavel again. "Miss Richardson," she said, "if you're interested, there's a youth legal fellowship program starting in 3 months. I'd like to recommend you personally." Ava smiled, not for cameras, for herself. "Thank you, Your Honor, but I've already started my own." She held up her phone. An app prototype. Briefcase, a platform for kids to report wrongful arrests and get free legal help, built from the ground up, in memory of every name left off the record. Outside, the protest had turned into celebration, but Ava didn't hear the cheering. Not really. She walked out the courtroom doors with Jamal beside her, her briefcase in hand, her shoes scuffed from the week's war, and as she stepped into the sunlight, someone in the crowd shouted, "She didn't just win, she changed the game." And Ava looked back at the courthouse one last time and whispered to herself, "Now let's burn the rule book they never followed."